Hello to all the rugby league diehards and welcome to another episode of Six to Go. My name is Tom Campbell and it's great to have your company. As we head into today's episode, you know how it works. We will cover 6 topics related to the game or even their own career. My guest this week is Peter Sterling, first member of the NRL Hall of Fame to come on the podcast, and as good as he was as a player, he was just as good as an analyst and broadcaster. Sterlo retired at the end of last season, but that just didn't fit with my schedule. He can't be totally done before coming on Belgium's #1 rugby league podcast. Hope you enjoy our chat. Here's Peter Sterling. I'm joined by Peter Sterling as the next guest of the Six to Go podcast. Hey, Sterlo, how are you, mate?
Hey, Tom, never better. Thanks for having me on and, enjoying, obviously, this time of year.
No worries, mate. It's a thrill to have you on, and I've got 6 topics to cover with you today, and I'll kick things off with Nathan Cleary. Nathan Cleary, I'd like to have a quick chat about his development. It's been a rapid one. Have you ever seen someone be so good so young?
It's a good question. I did describe him at the end of last year as a complete footballer, and I guess I haven't said that about too many, players who are still in their early 20s. There's a lot to like about him. I think with young players, the first thing you look at is, defensively, are they going to handle the rise into first grade and be able to do that, week on week? And I've got to say, he's an excellent defender. So that was certainly a box that was ticked. But a wonderful kicking game, very astute. The thing I think that really stands out in regards to Nathan is his composure at such a young age. Like I know when I'm going back to when I played, I had success in my early 20s, but a lot of that was down to the fact that I had guys like Ray Price and Ron Hillitch and Steve Edge and Bob O'Reilly and Mick Cronin, all these really seasoned, experienced players around me. So I just had a very simple role and simple job. Whereas Nathan, I know that he's got, Isaiah Yeo and Fisher Harris and these guys, but really he's taken on the brunt of that responsibility that's at such a young age, and he's just done it so cool, calm and collectedly. I think that really stands out, is his demeanour, his composure, his understanding of the game at a young age. And I think he understands the tempo in a game. He knows how to play with momentum. So if his side is on top, then, he speeds the game up. If his side needs a bit of a break, he can slow the game down to suit. So he's got a great insight to the game as well. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there's a lot to like about him. And, the great thing is that in 3 or 4 seasons' time, he's going to be an even better player just because of the experience that he will get in that, that period of time.
How much do we owe the simultaneous success of Jerome Luai to Nathan's development?
It's ideal, the fact that they came through as juniors together and have played a lot of football. There's a real familiarity about their game and they complement each other, particularly well. Jerome is a real runner of the football, kind of that bouncing figure that's plays with great exuberance and enthusiasm, and that's infectious in itself. But you've kind of got the calming influence of Nathan there to just keep things on an even keel when needed. So I think if you have a look at a lot of the great halves pairings, there is a bit of a contrast in the way that they play. That one tends to be more a runner of the football. Not saying that Nathan isn't a good runner, because he is, but someone who's maybe more of a ball playing type role, and then you've got the effusive kind of player around him to take advantage of that. And obviously Cleary and Luai have done a fantastic job over the last couple of seasons.
I'm of the belief that in the grand final just gone, if Nathan Cleary was kicking for South Sydney would have won. And that's not a knock against the South's halves. That's just how good Nathan was that night. What is the most impressive aspect of his game to you? For me, it's his kicking game.
Well, that's a huge part of it, isn't it? Kicking in today's game, it always has been, but I think kicking even more so important these days with the changes in momentum. And when a side does get momentum, their ability to really, sometimes put the game out of reach very, very quickly. And as I say, we go back to Nathan's composure, his understanding. I love players who kick early, especially after scoring points, just to put the onus back onto the opposition, maybe force an error and, really ram it home. And there's no fear in his game, and you put that alongside an understanding of what kick is needed at what particular time. And his execution, obviously, is very, very good. Some of his high kicks for the back three were, they were terrorised. But that's, in today's game, that's what you need to do. It really just doesn't cut it now, putting up a high up and under. You've really got to sort of be able to put up a different type of kick. And, he kicks the ball in the belly so that it floats. He's got the spiral kick so that it moves late. So he's got a great variety of kick, but most importantly, he knows when to kick, what type of kick is needed, and how to get the job done off the boot.
I'd like to ask you about the role of locks in the game. It seems like over the past 15 years, the role has developed from a third front rower into almost a third half. We've gone from lock forwards like Greg Eastwood, Sam Burgess, Paul Gallen, for example, and now we've got Isaiah Yeo, Victor Radley, Cam Murray. I'd even throw Brandon Smith in there. First of all, what type of player would you like to play with in that position?
See, Tom, I go back a lot further than you do. I go back to the days when the lock forward was a number 8. He wasn't the number 13. And going back those years, they basically were a cover defending player. And some of the most graphic images you'll see of the likes of John Raper, God rest his soul, and Ronnie Coote, those siding bootlace tackles coming across in cover defence, where they played on an edge and basically played that role. Then they sort of were pushed in a little bit, or pushed more up into the front line. I played alongside Ray Price, which was an absolute joy, so kind of workaholics. And as you point out, in recent times, the now number 13 is a middle forward. But again, the evolution of that is, I think, on the back of the quick play the ball and how vital it is in today's game, because the games are really all about momentum now. And the way that you get momentum and you get a hold of the contest is to be better in the play the ball area than the opposition. Now, if you are getting quick play the balls, it's not ideal to have to rely on your halves to come in and take advantage of that. So now to have a lock forward who can use the football, who's got a little bit of footwork, that can punch in on the back of a quick play the ball, has a pass in them so that they keep the roll going. And then on the back of that, you've got your 7 and your 6 who can, continue the carnage type thing. So it certainly is advantageous to have a lock forward these days who can play with the football, has some footwork, can pass, before and through the line, because that just takes a little bit of pressure off the halves having to do that. But it's all about the momentum from a quick play the ball, which is paramount these days. If you speak to any players in the NRL and you ask them what's the most important thing, it's the speed of the play of the ball, how you can get yours going as quickly as possible, and how you slow down the opposition. And that's where you get momentum, and it's so hard to wrest it back in today's game.
I've seen you break this down before, and Isaiah Yeo at Penrith. If you just watched Isaiah Yeo in a game, it is like magic. It is the way he is able to help Nathan and Jerome on the back of the quick play the ball, like you said. Whereas Cam Murray has got the quickest play the ball in the game. Is it the fact that generally lock forwards, they're all great runners of the football as well, that it's almost like having an extra. It's almost like having, I know that this is a bit of a weird comparison, but 2 Jerome Luais out there in the Penrith case?
Kind of. It's just having somebody, closer to the play the ball area who, is not going to waste that quick play the ball that we're talking about. The other thing that I'll throw in, Tom, is also the way that the role of the fullback has changed, because that has an impact on your 6, 7 and now 13. Again, going back in the day, your fullback was basically the last line of defence, and really only got into the attacking side of your game, and that was coming in between centres who used to play on the same side of the field, and get the fullback to chime in and create an overlap. Now they play more like a Jerome Luai. I think more than an Isaiah Yeo, it's more Dylan Edwards who fills that role, because they sweep around now, maybe 2 passes, 3 passes wide, and then has a pass in that run to actually open up things on the outside. James Tedesco is the perfect example of how his passing game has developed. And a lot of this goes back to Billy Slater, who came in and was probably at the forefront of coming in and playing like that extra wider ball player. But this has an impact on this 13 as well. So, roles have changed across the park. And the fact that the one now plays the way that he does allows the 13 to play his way. And all of this helps your 7 and 6 who can sort of stand back a little bit more, take in the situation and know when to put their foot down.
Is that what separates good teams from great teams? Because if you have a look at the top 4 last year, you got Storm with Brandon Smith, Isaiah Yeo at Penrith, Jake Trbojevic at Manly, and Cameron Murray at South. Is that like if they're not the 4 best in the game, they're close enough? Is that what separate? Like, is the position that important now that it can elevate a team that much?
Oh, yeah, no, it's very important, no doubt about that. I wouldn't say that it's the difference between, maybe a good team and a great team, or even a team, to go on and win the premiership. Good coaches will work out what type of players that he has and the best way to utilise those talents. But yes, take a guy like Dale Finucane. It wasn't that long ago. Dale pretty much tucked the ball under the arm and, was a workaholic. Now you look at him; he's developed a passing game, and that's helped the Melbourne Storm, and it will help. I think he's gone to the Bulldogs now, so that'll help go there and add to their side. So you can still only utilise the talents of what you've got, but it does seem it's no coincidence that the 13s now are much more. They have the ability. I love, seeing a first receiver who can, shape the pass outside, but is actually passing inside. And we've seen any number of those players that you've just mentioned able to do that. Normally, when you'd see a 7 and 6 do that. Now we see that from the 13s, and that's really hard to defend against.
Okay, Sterlo, let's move on to the Parramatta Eels. What are they missing?
I knew
here?
we'd get there.
What are they missing here? Why are they a very good team? They are a very good team, but why can't they break through?
Well, I've said for quite a while, Tom, that that to win a premiership, you've got to have a lot of things go your way. But ultimately, if you have a look, it's the best defensive team in the competition will generally take out the title, or will certainly be in the grand final. And maybe we might go back to 2005, with all due respect to the West Tigers winning that year. They won their grand final, I think, on a different type of game where they played to the edges through Scott Prince and Benji, and it was that was a different year to certainly what we've seen since. Until Parramatta can consistently win games against the top teams by a scoreline of 8-6 or 10-8 or 14-10 or whatever, you've got to be able to win those type of games consistently, and Parramatta have been unable to do that. Now, I think we're all heartened by the fact that a couple of games at the end of last season, and most notably that 2-point loss to Penrith, showed that they're not far off the mark. But there have been too many times over the last couple of seasons, and this is for a top 4 or top 5 side I'm talking about, where against the Roosters and the like, the game has been in the balance with 20 minutes to go. There hasn't been much in the scoreline, but invariably it has been the other team that has been able to finish stronger and get on top, and sometimes run up a bit of a scoreline in that last 20 minutes. So Parramatta have not been a resilient enough football team over the last couple of years. They're getting there, but also that I think that window of opportunity is certainly starting to close. So you've got to strike while the iron is hot, and the iron has been hot for a little while now for Parramatta, but they just haven't had that ability against the best sides to do it week in, week out in really tough situations and win by only conceding a small amount of points. So, I'm hopeful at the end of last season and a couple of those performances they can build on. And if they can do that, now don't forget, this is a side that were wooden spooners, 6 years ago type thing. Yep. And I think, we've often said that, it's a fantastic effort to go from 16th to, say, 5th, which is what they've done in that period of time. But we also acknowledge the fact that to go from fifth to first is probably even more difficult than rising, from the bottom of the ladder to be playing finals football. Then to take that next step, it's a tough task. And Brad Arthur has been enlisted with the job to try and get them over the line. He's done a fantastic job to get them this far. But I'm cautiously optimistic that they now have an understanding of what needs to be done to win those games that they've been unable to do against the best teams in the last couple of seasons.
I spoke last week to Brent Reid about how I thought Dylan Brown's last year, when you really look at it and break it down, was extremely lacking when you consider his natural talent, his hype, and to be fair, the money he's on. What's one thing, if you're advising Dylan Brown, you would want him to focus on?
No, I just want him involved. I want the football in his hands often. I want him to want the ball. I think that when times get very, very difficult, you don't want players becoming anonymous. And I think, with all due respect to Dylan, that he tends to drift out of a game in those circumstances. Since he's been in the top grade, I go back to, I was talking about Nathan Cleary. The first thing I look at for young players is their defence. He's been tremendous defensively the last couple of years, but we just need more more out of him now with the football in hand, and not just when things are going well. I want him to actually want the football more when the side's looking for a lift, or they're on their back foot, or they're in a degree of trouble. That's when you want your playmakers to really lift those around him, because that's infectious. The rest of the team are looking for your playmakers and their body language as to how they're travelling. And as I say, in difficult situations, I just think Dylan drifts out of the game, and that can be infectious as well, because the players around him can sort of feel that and maybe get caught up in that type of mentality. So, in answer to your question, I want Dylan with the football in hand a lot more often, especially when things aren't going well for the side.
Just to finish off on Parramatta, they lose Reid Marnie at the end of the year and Josh Hodgson comes in. Can I get your thoughts on that move?
I'm really disappointed that Reid has gone back to the Bulldogs. I don't know what the situation is in regards to the offer and, whether it was one. I'll never begrudge a young player grabbing the contract that they can. But, I think we got him for $5,000 from the Bulldogs a number of years ago, and we've turned him into basically a state of origin representative, chosen in the squad for Queensland. So he's done very well at our club, and I'm hoping that he'll have a bumper season next year as well before he does leave. But he's a young player, and his best football is still to come, and it's going to be hard to watch him doing that in another team's jersey. But if you're going to lose Josh, then to lose Reid, a guy like Josh Hodgson coming in is, it softens a blow to a degree. I'm a huge rap on him. I know that he's getting he's closer to the end of his career than the start, but I just think he can do a great job for Parramatta. His experience, his understanding of the game as well, seasoned player. And, realistically, the Achilles heel for Parramatta in the last couple of years has been the lack of depth in that hooking role. I thought that guys like Ray Stone came in, and Lussick, did a good job. Lussick did a good job as well. But if Reid Marnie wasn't on deck, then we certainly lacked some depth there. So hopefully Josh will come in after Reid and will bolster that with some players around him. I think Mitch Rain has come to the club as well. I could be wrong. It's off season, so I'm not. I haven't read as much lately, but it's an area that Parramatta have needed to bolster, because we've been a bit skinny there in the last couple of years. To lose Reid Marnie it's a real blow. But I'm a huge rap on Josh Hodgson.
Sterlo, the Titans are putting a lot of eggs in some very young baskets with a spine of Campbell, Brimson, Sexton, and probably Clark. What are your thoughts on Brimson to 6?
Look, I've hardly seen him play much in that position, so it's kind of hard to judge whether he's got the kind of game that would suit that role. He's a footballer, and that's a big that's a real plus for him. He does look like the kind of player that no matter what number you put on his back, then he's going to have an impact for you. So, I'm not quite sure what the plan is up there. I really liked, the halfback who went to Canberra.
Jamal
Fogarty. So, that would not have been an easy decision to allow him to go. And obviously, with Ash Taylor not there as well, there are opportunities. So, obviously they know the situation up there, and they've made a commitment for the future with a young guy like Sexton, who in his limited time in the top grade, he didn't look out of place. Brimson, as I say, he's a footballer. I think he'll handle the 6. I like him at 1, but again, you've got to go with what you've got and where the coach thinks that he'll get the best input from those players. And obviously they think that AJ Brimson is he's an NRL 5'8" and can take the type of form that he displayed out the back up into the front line.
They were a finals team last year, and they lose Fogarty, their most experienced member of the spine. Is going this inexperienced a risk you could personally justify? Because I'm not sure what the ceiling is, but the floor could be a disaster.
Yeah, look, time will tell. I don't know. As I say, I don't quite know what's coming through up there. They obviously have a plan in place, and last year there was some really good signs there with the type of football that they played. That's under Holbrook. I really liked some of the way they approached games. They were actually a breath of fresh air. The fact that they were prepared to attack from kickoffs and those kind of things. And I thought their forwards did a good job. I thought Jared Wallace probably had his best year since he'd played Origin. Tino is going to be a huge buy. Fafita will get better. So, there's plenty to build on there. And, their style of play is different to other teams. And, again, Justin Holbrook obviously knows what type of footy he wants to play. And he knows better than anyone the type of player that he needs to play that type of football. So I'm prepared to back him and show confidence that, he knows the direction that the Titans are heading. The last year or two, it's been an upward spiral. I'd like to think that will continue, but again, only time will tell. But I think it would be a disappointment if they didn't play finals football next year again.
Stella, I'd love to know who's a player that's playing today that you would have loved to have played with. Now, they don't have to be the best player. Just who would you have loved to have had in your team?
Well, look, it may well be pretty much the best player. I think, to play with Tom Trbojevic would be something special. I guess, to have a player like him in your team that can make the difficult look so easy and can turn games and look, basically win. I won't say win games on his own, but to be so dominant in such a short period of time in games and that where he can be involved in 2, 3, 4 tries in a 10-minute period and the game's over. So to be able to, I think the confidence that teams get out of their fullback is so important. It's kind of like that security blanket that you have. So to have Tom Trbojevic, in behind, knowing that he can get you out of trouble both with the football and defensively, that's a really nice feeling for a player in the front line to know that you've got that artillery behind. So, I think I could really enjoy 80 minutes knowing that Tom Trbojevic was playing in the same colours as I was.
He had a phenomenal year last year. There's no doubt about it, and statistically one of the more dominant years ever put together. Have you ever seen a year like that? Because he missed the first 4 weeks and maybe 1 or 2 others due to Origin, but he missed the first 4 weeks of through injury, but he lapped everyone in the Dally-Ms, and I think he set a record.
Yeah, look, I'm sure that there probably have been periods during seasons in the past. A guy like Jared Hayne obviously had a golden period going back over a decade, but to come in and do what Tom did, not just at club level, what he's done at Origin, has been phenomenal as well. And there was some raised eyebrows when Brad Fittler chose him in the centres. But really, I never had any qualms about that because you just know that he's just going to impose himself on a game, and he obviously did that. And think he scored a hat-trick over in Perth, and he's just been phenomenal in the last couple of seasons. Hopefully, injuries will stay out of his career, and we'll just continue to see the best. But you're right, that's Stella, coming in, not starting the season and having a bit of a checkered pre-season, which can sort of inhibit players, markedly. It can take them a long time to sort of find or hit their straps if they haven't had a great off-season. Well, Tom just came in and from game one was the best player and was pretty much every week. So we'll see more of it. Yeah, it's the tip of the iceberg with Tom Trbojevic. There is still so much more to come. And if I'm a Manly fan, you want this player to be playing at the club for life, because you don't let these players go anywhere else.
Finally, Sterlo, I'd like to ask you about your own career. You went from successful player to successful broadcaster. Now, I'm not trying to embarrass you here, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but in my opinion, you're the best player turned broadcaster there's been.
Thank you.
Did you feel it was a natural transition going into that role?
No, not really. Although I suppose, I've said before, I didn't play a lot of football in the last 2 years of my career because of a bad shoulder. So I spent a fair bit of time on the sidelines, and I was given the opportunity to do some media work on the sidelines during that rehabilitation. So when I retired because of the shoulder, the transition was made a little bit easier because I'd already done some stuff, but it was still, I've always said that at 32 years of age, it was a stark realisation that the bulk of my working life was still in front of me. And, back at that time, you certainly weren't prepared for life after football anywhere near as well as they are these days. So, without an opportunity to step into the media, I've got no idea what direction my life would have taken. But the transition was certainly made easier because Channel 10 at the time had the footy, and I was able to do some sideline work for them. And then when I pulled the pin, and Channel 9 offered me an opportunity, it was, I wouldn't say terrified, but I wasn't sure that I could do the job. And I was very fortunate that at that time, the people around me were fantastic. A guy called Gary Burns, who was the director of sport at Channel 9, was phenomenal. He employed both Paul Vaughton and myself. Ian Frickberg, who's just one of the great television men. He was putting together deals for the English Premier League, and had been around elite sport. And then, of course, Kerry Packer. Even though I never, spent a lot of time in his company, I always felt the support of the Packers all the way through. So I had really good people around me, and it never felt like work. And that's been the best part of the job, was that I went along and was still able to remain close to what my passion was. So the transition was easy that way. It was just I didn't want to embarrass myself, stepping into a new role and getting it wrong.
Well, working in media myself, I know that there's, for everyone who is on air at some point, there's always one or two people behind the scenes that really, really help you progress along your journey. And
yeah.
You mentioned a few there, but also the fact that you came into media roughly the same time as Fatty, was that like a you two are obviously quite close mates. Was that beneficial to go in there with someone at the same time?
Oh, who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Look, Fatty, when you're looking to do something and you put a for and against column, he was in both. And I think the first time we worked together, that was the infamous time where he described the Walters brothers as being from Two Head City, and there was an uproar about that. And Paul had to explain that this was a term of endearment, that he was from Brisbane, and if he was from Ipswich, that was just, there was nothing derogatory about it at all. But he was forced to ring the mayoress actually of Ipswich to apologise, which he tried to do, but unfortunately the mayoress kind of kept butting in and saying, but no, look, it's not good enough. And eventually Paul had enough, and at the end of the conversation, basically said, anyway, which head am I talking to, and hung up. But I didn't know Paul particularly well when we went into the media together. But I think, well, I know we both had a very strong respect for each other as players. And so that was a really nice foundation. And we pretty much found that, from day one, you talk about that contrast, or I was talking about the contrast of the 6 and 7 type thing. There was a real contrast between us. I was probably a little bit more serious than him. He had his own inimitable style, which, I sat next to him for a long time on a Thursday night on the footy show, and people do not understand how difficult live television is to host. And to do it for an hour and a half or 2 hours, as he did, with no script. If you make a mistake, there's no safety net, and he just did it in his own way. And I think the best thing, Tom, we ever did was that we understood that the media can be a pretty fickle vocation, and things could change in 24 hours if they want a new voice or a new direction or anything like that. So we always treated the job that it could finish tomorrow. And ridiculous to think that we got through 30 years of doing that. But that was our mentality, that we're just going to enjoy it for what it is for as long as we can. And, when we're told to pull the pin, we'll move on. But until then, we're just going to have a really good time doing it. And that's exactly what we did.
Well, Sterlo, that's all I've got for you. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Like I said earlier, it's been a big thrill to get you on, and hopefully it's not the last time.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you. Thanks for your kind words. And no, it was good fun. It's nice to look back, but I'm really keen to be looking forward now as to what's to come.
Thanks, mate. Talk soon.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers, mate.
A big thanks to Sterlo for coming on the show. He's recently turned full-time golfer, so to have him on the show to get his thoughts was great. By the way, if you want to get in contact with me, you can on Twitter at @tcanfell. And don't forget to give the 6 to Go Facebook page a like as well. My name is Tom Canfell. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And until next time, this has been the 6 to Go podcast, and that is full time.